What's close? What's his?
It's so south.
I really like to. I mean, it's a surf thing.
What? My problem is I can attach to my phone. I can try to keep it for too many years. But, you know, it's like 2 months. I had mine for like 40 years.
I can get to this point. And it'll log me.
Sorry, I'm watching.
I did.
Yep. That's the worst part about being on salary. Doing well. He's about to kill everybody in the room. It just won't stop. Because it's just building up. Because we do all buildings on the side. I think she's about you.
Oh, it's doing good. How are you?
Get away with it. Well, I can get there.
So another person walks in and says, I need this by Friday. Eventually just goes transfer.
Well, I did exactly what it said on here.
Yeah, I know.
F6 and the power button for 15 seconds.
Nice crowd here today.
Oh, yeah. I'm on the agenda. I can guess why they're here.
And he comes out and goes, yeah. What do you think about the whole C Street thing? What are you even talking about?
Which one?
The in the selective discussion regarding Steamship Authority comment request and C Street area license.
Oh, I don't. Those were just Those were extensions of C Street. I thought you said C Street. Oh, they only. Yeah, they wanted a couple more times. I don't think it's a big deal myself.
No one's calling me, sent me an email saying no.
No, I don't. They don't. They're screwed. They're only coming, you know, when the right time is right. Like they come beginning of the weekend and leave at the end of the weekend.
They didn't believe, and they come if Steamship allows them in there.
You know, Steamship can control it, and they're allowing it, I think. So, yeah.
It's not very controversial.
I don't think it is now.
Well, that figures. Oh my God! Oh my. Okay.
I was trying to figure out how to get out, how to justify getting out of this tonight.
Well, okay. Wow. I was like, well, I think you just proved my point. Yeah, there you go. That's a good point.
I'm just like, I don't know. Couldn't make up a good excuse.
They showed me around, you know, yeah, there's some areas that look like they're very slippery.
She's okay, I can tell.
Okay. Well, good luck with that. You have something on you.
We're taking this back. There's a bit of an issue. Whoever had these motions, can you just that's the one just made.
Mike, are you here for anything in particular? If people aren't here for a specific thing, they're going to find something. It's not usual. This is normal.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good to have you back, Erica, for that. We were way off. Way off. All right, we're going to do county second at the end of this meeting. So we're going to start off with the select board meeting. So I'd like to call to order the January 30th select board meeting to order. There is one change in the agenda, number 4, on consent items. We're taking that off. So number 4 on the consent items we're removing. Okay. Announcements, Libby?
We have one announcement that the board meeting is being video and audio recorded, and also the chief just let me know right before the meeting that the Pulpus Harbor dredging project was finished up today. Oh. So we're very glad about that. Thank you, chief.
Is there any public comment here tonight that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, there's no new business. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, my coat's the wrong color, so I sort of blend in with the rug.
Hi.
So Campbell Sutton, I'm just here to ask a quick question. Rumor has it that concerning the rotaries, that the town is looking at putting in rotaries without going to town meeting for a vote. And I'm just wondering if rumor has it correctly. Are there rotaries that are being planned to go forward without?
Not that I know of. Libby, do you?
Well, I would just say, and I don't know if Mike Burns is here or maybe Andrew can elaborate, but funding has already been approved by town meeting for the design of some roundabouts, specifically Bartlett and Surfside, although I don't think we have the construction funding yet on that project. So until we do, that project can't proceed to completion.
Okay.
There is a warrant article that the board discussed last week for a roundabout at Fairgrounds and Old South that will be going before town meeting. And I'm not sure what other there would be.
Well, so the design funding has been put forward for a couple of them, but is the construction funding going to go through town meeting, or is that going through state and federal funds?
Specifically for the Bartlett roundabout, we would need to appropriate additional funds at town meeting for construction, is my understanding.
Okay, and would that be the same for the Surfside? I'm sorry.
No, I do think there is some TIF money that would be used for Bartlett, right? Some state funding.
I don't know what the overall funding is. There may be an offset, but I don't think it's enough to complete the entire project without additional town funds. Okay. So for the Bartlett / Surfside, one roundabout we're talking about at that location, would still need to come back to town meeting for additional action.
Okay, well, as you can imagine, I'm going to go on record as saying I'm against a rotary at Bartlett, or a roundabout, however you want to call them. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comments tonight that's not on the agenda? Okay. There's no new business. Is there approval of minutes, payroll warrants, and treasury warrants?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any pending contracts you'd like to go over, Libby, or the board?
There's one pretty large one for a little over $200,000, $232. It's a DPW contract with Hazen and Sawyer. It is for engineering services and support for stormwater drainage systems. And that is funding that's gone through prior town meeting warrant articles. I'm just mentioning it because it's kind of large, but we've got a number of projects in the queue.
And what, do you know what areas it's specifically doing it?
I think it's a number of different areas, but
It's all right.
Rob can explain.
He's already up.
Too late.
This is the background. Thank you, Rob McNeil, DPW. This is the support services for GPS and review of the CCTV and condition assessment of last year's CCTV effort as well as this year's. Last year's focused in the Pleasant Street area. This year's focus is Children's Beach and all the way up through Lily Pond.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Make a motion to approve the pending contracts.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. On to consent items. Remember, we do not have number 4, so we have 1, 2, 3, and 5. Is there any questions on those? You want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the consent items as presented with the exception of item 4.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 That motion carries. Thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you.
Could I just be recognized briefly? I don't want to prolong your meeting, but I do think that some of these parcels at on the agenda complete the grand swap between the town and the land bank, and I think that's worthy of some special recognition here. Certainly with the board members, I know you've spent a lot of time in this, and I want to thank town administration for their patience on this project as well. We're lucky to have Vicki Marsh, who spent an inordinate amount of time getting this all through, and the land bank and the land bank staff as well should be recognized. And I do think I've heard, grousing, oh, it was hard and it took a lot of time and whatever, but I think our work with the land bank produced a great result, and I just wanted to mention it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Okay, citizen department request. This is from the planning office. Request for acceptance of grant of access easement from cold storage 2. This is on, what's the address? Off Amelia Drive?
Amelia.
Sorry, it's 11, and there's an error on the agenda. It should actually say comfort storage.
Cumbert. Okay. Andrew, you'll walk us through this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Board. This is a voluntary easement granted by the owner of the property, the Green Lady, as I think most people know it as. It is something that came up during the planning board hearing. It's a requirement that they bring forward an easement to you for acceptance. This connects between Amelia Drive, which is now a public way, thanks to your earlier action under the county commissioners on that roadway, and the town's property at the rear. So having different access points is important for traffic flow in that area. Having the easement doesn't mean it's automatically opened. It's there for the town's use in the event that it needs it. It can provide for walking, biking, or vehicular access. So I thank them for their bringing that forward for our use, and would ask you to move forward to accept it. Thank you.
Any comments?
Move approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 The motion carries.
Yeah, and this is something that Andrew's been trying to do for a while, and this is something we need to do more of, is connect some of these areas. So I think it's great.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you. All right, moving on to public hearings. If it's okay with the board, what's that? Can we open them all? Because they're different. Okay, we're going to open up all the public hearings under one. So that's A, B, C, and D. Just on number one. So is there anyone who'd like to speak on, I believe, A and B? These are somewhat connected. Anybody? Applicants? Okay. And so Eric, I'm not closing the public hearing on any of them. We're just going to...
You can close the public hearing for item 1A.
And 1A.
If there's no public comment, and
Okay.
you can take action on that.
Okay. So we'll close the public hearing for 1A. Comments on the board?
None. No. Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. On B, is there any public comment? Okay, we'll close that public hearing for B.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. On to C, on Baxter Road. Is there any public?
Miller.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry, Erica?
Sorry.
Miller was done.
That was B.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
So C is Baxter Road. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak on that?
Well, why is it on here?
Mr. Chairman, are we on the parcel behind you?
We're on C.
Oh,
Yeah, this is it. Yep.
Thomas Beretta. I gave you a handout. This road, we have, let's see, this is Baxter Road. This is a paper street and access to a paper street on a road that is parallel to Baxter Road. And it seems the town is in the process of taking it and gonna dispose of it as part of the yard sale. And I'm just trying to bring this to your attention because of the erosion that's happening at Baxter Road. It may be pertinent for the town to not take this and not dispose of it and leave it there so that in case we need it for access for the homeowners, we don't have to try to claw back this property that we gave away in 20 years. So I would probably advise or recommend to not actually take it so that it just stays as is so that we don't have to deal with it, and then there would never be a disposition to sell it. Just letting you guys know, considering that you guys had your coastal resiliency meeting a couple weeks ago, I figured that this would probably be pretty pertinent to the erosion factor that's going on out there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Board, Stephen Cohen, I represent the property owners here, and I also actually represent most of the property owners in the rest of this private way, which will be coming forward later. I appreciate Mr. Barado's sentiment and forethought, but it's actually unnecessary here. This way does not connect to anything. It connects to Ann's Lane, but it's not. It doesn't like it connects. It dead ends into a private property, and as you may or may not know, and you can look at the GIS, and there's a bunch of lots to the south that already use this way as their back access points, and there's lots to the north that use it as their back access points. And when you do the disposition of this, that would be the appropriate time for you to reserve and maintain access ways or utility easements or anything like that. So the closing of this through the yard sale program doesn't preclude you from reserving that as a future right. The intent actually here is to limit the idea. The neighbors who live here don't want a road going all the way through. They'd like to limit the size and scale and scope of it, but they're not opposed to having a reservation they actually want reservations of the existing uses and are not opposed to having a reservation of future access way if needed or for utility easements if needed. So we wouldn't get into a situation where we had said, oh, I wish we had thought of that. It's already thought of, but that's not this point. At this point, you're just authorizing the taking, and then when you authorize the disposition is when you would put that in. And you've done it dozens of times.
Okay.
Thanks.
Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with what Mr. Cohen just talked to you about, and I think it's important to put it on the record that these, when we get to a disposition stage, looking for some sort of emergency access is appropriate. It's something that the planning board discussed when they signed the A&R plan here. But again, that happens at the disposition phase, not acquisition. And we continue to keep having this discussion. Acquisition is phase one. It puts the town in a position where it controls the property, has a stake in the outcome of the property, and then at the disposition phase is when all of these other things are negotiated. So I would ask you to move forward with the acquisition as presented tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Comments from the board? Questions?
Yeah, I have strong reservations along the lines of what Mr. Berida brought up, that we are in the process of a coastal resiliency plan, and these roads could be very key in the future. I'm not entirely sure what is the best way forward. I wouldn't want to be in a position where there's certain expectations by the homeowners that there would never be a road there. I think we need to look at these paper roads as part of our resiliency plan. So that would be my main concern, is that there are certain expectations and that it's not just emergency access, that for all we know, we don't know because we don't have a coastal resiliency plan at this stage. This could be the road. This could be the access, not just emergency access. So
I agree. And just, I guess it was actually hearing Attorney Cohen's kind of presentation of what the interest and expectations are of the owners, that they didn't want a road here. We've spent some time in our conversations with the Wisconsin Bluff Preservation Fund about identifying roads in the event of the need to, as a result of Baxter Road being closed. And before I felt comfortable voting in favor of that, I would like to see that plan and having a conversation about that. I understand, Andrew, we always, we say that about this is a taking, not a disposition, but it certainly starts the process and creates some expectations. When when we say, well, eventually a yard sale, so those are already kind of baked in expectations. And before they do that, I personally would like to know more about the kind of retreat plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Steve, Jim.
I do want to make a clarification. I shouldn't have said that they don't want to see a road go through. What I meant was they don't want to see it opened up to its full width, which is what you could potentially happen now. Much of it actually is effectively used as a road. It's not connected all the way through, but it basically comes pretty close, but there's a north end and a south end. And what they'd like to do is see it not opened up to its full width. So they'd like to, what I would present to you before the disposition plan, or as part of the disposition plan, is a survey that shows these are the lots, this is how you would cut up the land when you dispose of it, and this is the easement and essentially roadway that would be reserved and maintained within it. So you would approve that disposition plan with that, 100% control of where that line is, but it will be presented to you with that already in it for your consideration. Thanks.
Thomas?
I appreciate what Mr. Cohen said, but unfortunately this plan says right here, the taking and disposition right on it. So that wasn't thought of or addressed when this came to the actual taking. Otherwise, it would have it on there, sort of like what James Street has. It shows how there's an easement going to be on there for, for a pedestrian and all that. So that was already thought about when that plan was done. This wasn't thought. Also, it's a lot easier just to let this be than to try to claw back property once the property gets transferred back out. Even if there's an easement and everything else, once it's registered, we're not going to claw that back. And I'm not talking 20 years. I'm talking 50, 60 years from now. We're all going to be gone, but our, ancestors are going to need that access most likely.
Matt, do you have something?
Yeah, I share his concerns. I understand what, I share the concerns that their expectations are made. I've voted on a couple of things that after I learned about it, I wished I hadn't, on a couple of different, Massaquoi being a key one. I've got examples. But, so I'd like to know what went into the process to ensure that we're keeping the roads we need next to the coasts. So if we had those answered and, and saw the big picture here and knew that the big picture was considered, I'd be more favorable. So.
Anybody else from the public like to speak? Any other comments from the? Oh, sorry. I do a quick scan and from right to left, and then I miss some people on the right.
It's Ron Bamber. I didn't come here for this here, but I can see already 50 or 60 years Baxter Road's going to be gone. I've been here 47 years. There's one spot 16 feet from the bank, and there's hardly no access to get out of there, Baxter Road. You give this away, it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. 50 or 60 years, it won't be a Baxter Road. And they're going to have a real problem getting any in and out of there with electricity and houses to get it. You need everything you can get. I wouldn't give it away at all. I'm here for another thing that I came, but I just heard the thing, so I had to get up and say my piece. The other paper roads are great if you can give them to neighbors, and it doesn't matter that they've been doing and selling them. But this is ridiculous.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right.
This is on James Street, or you
No.
wait for that?
No, this isn't on James. This is on Baxter Road.
Just Baxter?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I can see from the tone of the board that you'd like to see the protections I'm talking about, put forward potentially. So, if you want to defer action on this, we can come forward with a plan that shows the access way reserved, so the board could feel comfortable that we could take simultaneous action, or at least one action with the idea that you're not worrying about what's happening in the future. You already have it in front of you. Does that sound?
It seems. Yes, the devil is in the details.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, they've been waiting 3 years. They could wait a few more months.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
And just a comment for the chair. We spent a lot of time in executive session discussing the kind of the fallback on real estate, and for the public, this was a plan that was negotiated as part of the original kind of agreement back in 2015, I believe. So however we do that, to me, they need to be linked somehow. So whether that's an executive session or some other way.
Okay. Any other public comment before we close the public hearing?
Do you want to close or continue?
Was this
Andrew?
just be more of a, if the board wants to continue?
We'd have to, I'd prefer we take it off, because we'd have to have it continued to a date certain, and it's too uncertain.
We could do it March 27th.
I personally think it's too uncertain.
Okay. So you're suggesting we close the public hearing and then?
And re-advertise.
Yep.
Either way is fine. I don't know that there's any harm in continuing, but if you leave the public hearing open, it gives us the ability to present you with more information as an alternative. But either way.
I'll take suggestions from Andrew or Libby, or what's the best course of action here?
I don't, it's sort of policy-ish, but if there is not a majority support to take action right now, I would close the hearing with no action.
Okay.
So moved.
All right, well, we'll close the public hearing. Pleasure of the board.
Move we take no action.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So for clarification, March 27th could be the next time we see this?
It depends on when we get the new plan from
Okay.
from the requesters, and we'll need to advertise for 2 weeks. So, just depends on how it works out in the queue.
Okay. Thank you, Erica. Moving on to D, this is James Street. We're going to open, the public hearing's already open for James Street. Is there any comments from the public? Rick?
Good evening. My name is Rick Atherton. I'm just interested here in trying to understand one aspect. I'm not opposing the taking. I was involved as a member of the board and pretty actively in making sure that the access points from Holbert to the harbor were properly taken finally. As you may well know, the town tried to take these several times in the past and never properly completed the paperwork. In this case, I just was trying to understand the two parcels and the fact that I understand this went through the planning board for an A&R, a division of James Street, that's approval not required. And I didn't know why that would have happened before the taking took place. I think the town was the signer, but Andrew could explain that. And I think because it came up in the last one, Andrew, that there was an A&R, I think it would be helpful for the public in general to understand the timing and what those are about. Thank you.
So, board members, to Mr. Atherton's question, the A&R creates the parcels for you to take. So in this case, James Street is not a parcel right now, it's just a street. So the A&R process, and this happens with all paper streets, they come in and define the parcels with the ownership interests of those parcels defined. So in this case, there's two owners on either side of the street. What's called the derelict fee statute sets the line in the middle of the way, and that's how the dimensions and how the parcels are defined. In other cases, in some of your prior actions, there might be 6, 7 owners. Again, you define out the parcels because the title interest is taken from those property owners. So it's really just the execution of the process. Okay.
So it sounds as though it's an A&R and you're getting 2 lots instead of 1, but it's not that at all. You're not getting, neither of these people are subdividing into further lots.
No, and if they, from the restrictions that have been put on these transfers, if they in fact go through to purchase them, they are bound to no further subdivision.
Right.
And again, the other depictions on this plan I think that caused some confusion was it shows fences, it shows some things that are on there. None of that is, I mean, that's to show the existing conditions, but none of that is subject to retention. Basically, through your negotiation and some of the discussions you've had already, that easement is not going to stay at that current 5 foot. It's going to be widened, and there might be other things that you decide before you get to the disposition phase. This is acquisition only.
Any public comment on James Street? Any questions for the board, for anybody? All right, we'll close the public hearing on D, James Street.
I'd move to
I
approve.
have a question for Andrew. I'll get back to the earlier comment about expectations. I know we've been negotiating with the owners, and are you know, have we completed that, or we have more to do, or?
There was a discussion with the with the real estate assessment committee, and the property owners were there. I see their attorney is here in the audience. I think it's from discussions afterwards, and Mr. DaCosta was there as well and discussed it with them. I think there's clear expectations that, you know, there's going to be a path there. There's going to be the one big beach easement, and all of the other factors are included. So I think they absolutely expect that.
That's correct.
And what was represented at our last meeting, an 8-foot path, et cetera, I was happy with. That was an improvement over what was presented. So if that's still what we're on phase for, then I think we're good.
And this is the taking, right? The next thing will be
We're just
decided.
doing the first step.
Right.
Yeah, I know you've closed, but if I can just comment on that.
Sure.
Yes, we had a very productive meeting with the real estate committee a month or so ago about this. And we will be working that out finally with them and with Andrew before we come back in for the disposition. There will definitely be an easement down the middle of the road, and we're working out all the particulars of that at the present time. But it's been a very productive discussion, and I think we're headed in the right direction on it.
And you've agreed to, the parties have agreed to the 8-foot width, which is what was
I think
discussed.
that's what we're going to wind up with, yeah. But we'll finalize that at the Real Estate Committee, exactly how it runs. There are a couple of twists to it, but we'll get it resolved.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
And before we, and there was there are neighbors from nearby that that value that, and so it's important that we continue that, sort of, that neighborliness in that area. It's great.
What's the time frame when this will come back onto us? Is it a couple months? Does it depend on what happens at the real estate meeting? I'm just curious, general time frame.
I think that, based on the time that we've spent, it probably could come back. I know we're trying to keep the February meeting light, so I would expect maybe the March meeting.
Okay.
But I will say too that we've accomplished, we meaning you, all of us together, have accomplished other pathways along that road. And when that was voted, that was the 100th year anniversary of the first attempt to get it done. So we are doing something right here and getting it accomplished.
Thank you.
You've been around that long, Andrew?
You wear it well.
You weren't the first one. You didn't start this process.
Okay, I'd like to open the public hearing to consider application for a new annual wine and malt beverage package store license for Nantucket Meat and Fish.
Before you open the public hearing, Mr. Chairman, I don't know what your board's policy is, but other boards do this when a person is recusing and there isn't a full board. We didn't realize that Ms. Hill-Holgate, obviously we had no way of knowing that Ms. Hill-Holgate would not be here tonight. We'd like to request that this matter be continued without opening to a meeting where there would be essentially a full board, a four-member sitting panel, and not just 3 members, given the importance of this to our client.
I don't recall ever not opening a public hearing and continuing the meeting. My understanding has always been you have to open the public hearing and continue it to a date certain.
It's been advertised that we would.
Has always explained to me.
Okay, so public hearing's open, and we can decide to, what are our options? To continue or move it to a date certain, and what are our options for a date certain? Do we have to re-advertise? And
we can continue it to a date certain without needing to re-advertise, which is obviously going to cost more money. Or you can close the public hearing and take no action, but then it'll have to be re-advertised. Right. I mean, I think it would be much easier just to continue it to a date certain, like maybe in 2 weeks or something, or next week, or I don't know.
We do have a lighter meeting next week, if that's an option.
So we need 4? We don't need 4, do we?
It's up to us. If
we don't need 4.
We could do it with 3.
Right. So I don't understand the.
Well,
but
she wants a full.
Generally speaking, other boards, and I can't speak for this board because I'm not here enough to know, but other boards, if they're shy a member, it's kind of a courtesy to the applicant if requested to continue to another date when there is a 4-person board or 5-person.
I don't know if Dawn, she may have recused herself the last time around, so I don't know.
She did not.
So
yeah, she didn't recuse herself last time. So if we were going to carry this forward, I would suggest next week, just because I've seen the agenda and we had to take a bunch of things off, or we go forward. And I guess it's up to the 3 of us.
Can I request a couple things from licensing. Licensing meeting is generally the 3rd Wednesday of the month, and I have several other things on that meeting on the 20th as well. So that would be.
Dawn won't be here that week, so we would have.
It would be back to the same thing, and I won't be here for the next 2. So.
You're not here. You're not here next week for this.
But I mean, I've given you everything I think you need, and I can put Chief into my position.
I think it's important that she's here.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm concerned about too is we do have such a great interest in this one application. I've gotten a lot of folks that have weighed in too as well. So in my head too would be advertising it again is something I think I would have some concern about because there are a great number of people that are here.
Have to re-advertise if you continue.
You don't. That's just I'm making that statement that I know it is certainly of great interest to a good number of people. So that's just a comment.
I personally think if you want a full board, we should also have Amy here too, personally. So we're talking March.
I mean, we try to keep these on the. We did an exception this month. The applicant asked to do it this week instead of last when we did all the other hearings for liquor. But so we like to try to keep it on that third Wednesday. I'm not usually good at that, but we're trying to do that. And we have, I think, 4 or 5 that we're looking to have on February 20th. So it'll be that subject on the 20th.
Is there an issue with the submittal of the application and the timing with ABCC?
They asked that we take action within 30 days of receipt of a complete application. This is still action. It's not a decision. It just says that we need to take some action.
Within 30 days of when
Within
this
30
was-
days. So this continuation would be action. You're making a decision. It doesn't say approve or deny in 30, just take action.
And so it was the applicant that requested that we put this on the agenda for this week?
Yeah,
outside
just
of the usual.
versus the third Wednesday that we usually do.
Okay, so that's why we do it on the regular time.
That was my fault. I was on vacation last week, so you can blame that
No,
entirely
I
on
just
me.
so
I had and of course I had no idea
Yeah.
what Ms. Hillgate's
Right,
schedule was going to be.
So if we have,
and if she's not here on the 20th of February, that's the same issue.
But we have Amy here.
Yeah.
So the next time that we could do this, having 4 board members and our licensing, expert would be March 6th.
or the third. It's the
If we're going
whatever
in
the
order.
licensing third week.
Which would be
in
March 20th.
March 20th.
Or even later, March 20th. So how do we feel, March 20th or?
I'm okay with that. If I think it's important to have Amy here, and I think if there's a request to have Dawn here, then it looks like March 20th is.
May I ask a question?
Yep.
It was unclear to me if Mr. Fee recused and if he is planning on recusing at a future meeting.
I can't.
He
He's shaking
just-
his head yes, that he was recused whenever it's on the agenda.
Do we need to check with legal counsel to make sure that we are within the guidelines? I know you said that.
We are
but
as
I'm-
far as continuing, and if there's a reason
all right.
such that is under yours, this is still action.
Okay. So I make a motion we continue this application till March 20th.
Second.
Any discussion? Right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your consideration.
My apologies to everyone who came out tonight to speak on this. We'll see you March 20th. And I guess we're on the town manager's report.
Okay, just bear with me for a second.
But you weren't ready. You thought you had some time.
I did think that.
Conference at MIT over the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
It's important to have Amy here for that. Too many questions.
On my breaks, I was kind of just looking around, talking to students. And I saw a bulletin board that had a really interesting picture, which I will text you. It challenges the.
Okay.
Ready, Libby? Yeah.
So the first item is the monthly town management activity report, and what I've been doing here is listing the highlighted, the sort of highlights of what we've been working on. Obviously, the 2019 annual town meeting warrant is a major project. The fiscal 2020 budget development also has been a major project. Strategic planning has been ongoing. We've been working with the Novak Group, as you probably know, to develop implementation plans, work schedules, things like that. We are going to be working with the Novak Group on a staffing study follow-up. They've sent us a proposal to assist with an implementation plan. We just haven't quite gotten to it yet, but it's in the queue. The Plus operational review had some couple of legal questions, which are with town council, and then that should be able to be finalized. A lot of time, as you all know, has been spent on the RFQ for the marijuana proposals. The committee has met a couple of times. We most recently asked for additional information. It's due tomorrow, and we have our next meeting scheduled for February 11th. Real estate matters, a lot of them, as you can see, and we have hopefully finalized, finally, the grand swap. We still have another transaction with the land bank involving the NISDA property. There's a, that is held up right at the moment in land court. And we are actively working on a job description for our real estate specialist that we talked about. Just to remind you, we had funding in our current budget, fiscal 19, for a contract, an independent contractor type of position for that work, but no one responded to the RFP that we issued. There may have been some confusion about it or some lack of clarity. So we met with a couple of people recently in the real estate industry to talk over the feasibility of a position like this, and we're just trying to get a job description together to get it out. It's quite painfully obvious that we need a position like that. Personnel, good news. We hopefully today filled the position of open meeting law coordinator, and so hopefully that person will be starting shortly. Harbor Place is underway with the board's negotiating team. We have a meeting in a week or two.
12th.
Thank you, the 12th, to meet with the owners, and we'll probably be reporting back shortly thereafter to the board on how those discussions are going. We commissioned a review of the infrastructure with an engineering firm. They gave us some estimates, and those are under review as well. Coastal Resiliency Plan, I think we've been keeping you up to date on that. The January 8th workshop was, I think, really well received and pretty successful, and we're following up with a conference scheduled for June with some other partners and some stakeholders, and the plan itself is in the process of being finalized. We are also talking about I think I've mentioned this before, a restructure in the Natural Resources Department so that we can have a dedicated position for coastal resiliency planning and projects and coordination and all of the things that need to be addressed, obviously, with a dedicated staff person. We have a number of things going on in IT. Team Dynamics is some project management software that we're going to be rolling out hopefully shortly.
Libby, is that all departments or just some?
It's where's Greg? It's all departments that have projects that need,
Okay.
you know, the bigger projects that we have maybe more than one department in on it, so everybody can see what has happened with it. Steering committee rollout. This is a recommendation that came out of the Plant Moran IT assessment a couple of years ago, and we've got a several hour-long meeting next week to get everybody together to get on the same page with IT sort of governance. Energov, the e-permitting is still moving along. It is not as smooth as we had hoped, but it's still out there, and we have a document management pilot program underway with a Laserfish program that is occurring with the health department. And just some...
Before you leave IT,
sure.
at the, and maybe we'll talk about it later, but the MMA, Jason and I spoke to a company whose name I can't remember now, who had a different way to approach interfacing with data from, rather than going through the Munis system. And I had their card in my pocket, but I don't have it. I know we talked to Brian about it, and I don't know if he had a chance to, but that might be another approach that we should think about.
What was it called, Brian? Something Gov?
What was it? ClearGov. That was it, ClearGov.
Because we asked him, how do you integrate with Munis? And he said, well, we don't. That's one of our advantages.
Right. And they had all of our data. They had a bunch of data from on Nantucket already. So I know that's been a real difficult, interface. So that's just something to might be another approach.
Thank you. We have some other initiatives and projects going on, including long-term landfill planning. We had a meeting this morning with our landfill operator, and there's other meetings happening tomorrow. We have our internal work group meeting next week, I think I scheduled it for. So we are really actively getting underway with the long-term planning for future landfill issues. We're trying to get together an town employee housing policy, and we're working on that sort of steadily, but other things keep getting in the way. The regulations codification project. we just sent some finally reviewed documents back to General Code, which is the contractor doing this work. They're reviewing it. They're going to give us a final draft, and then we are going to work on scheduling. Hopefully, I think the idea is to schedule a joint meeting with all the boards that have regulations, one public hearing to adopt them into this codified document. There are very few substantive changes, in fact, probably none, but there are some amendments that had to be made because of discrepancies between regulations and bylaws and out-of-date information, things like that. But that hopefully will happen before the end of the fiscal year. The L8 project is ongoing in discussions with National Grid. I think we have a meeting scheduled for next week to discuss reviewing this, right, Erica?
Sorry?
L8.
Yes.
We got a meeting next week on this. Nantucket water quality modeling. We have a contract with SMAST on this, and it is taking a little bit longer than we thought. Is Jeff here? No, maybe he's upstairs. He most recently said that he hopes to get a final report from SMAST, well, this month, but maybe it's more like February. But hopefully that will be coming very soon, and then at some point we'll give the board a presentation, hopefully again, but well before the end of the fiscal year. Pond management follow-up. We had a summer forum, if you recall, and we've been working on pond management principles. We were going to review them with the board, and then we decided before we unveil them to the board, we should have another meeting with the stakeholders to show them sort of what our final recommendations would be, so that we're in the process of scheduling that. We continue to have some meeting space challenges, and we're trying to sort of figure out workarounds and other ways to deal with it. And the old fire station reuse issue, we are waiting on a report from the Affordable Housing Trust, and I think we're going to have that by mid-February.
Great. Thank you, Libby.
Any questions on any of that? Okay. Okay, Public Works Director is going to give a few updates on the items that are listed there on the agenda.
Good evening. A few brief comments. Just to make the board aware, Milestone Road, there's some, Mass DOT has undertaken a safety improvement project at their expense, $3.2 million project to improve intersections at Tom Nevers and Pulpits Road. Also includes bus pull-offs along the entirety of Milestone, as well as striping and signage improvements. That's expected to start roughly mid-March and carry through Memorial Day. They certainly are been made aware of Daffodil and other coordination requirements. Waste stream processing modifications at the landfill. We are working together with our waste adoption partners to improve the waste streams that are occurring there with the eye towards reducing the amount that's being landfilled. That includes slight modifications to recycling, which basically just at the drop-off center, we're sliding the glass drop-off all the way down against the building. So all the recyclable products will be in line with one another. Modifying some signage specifically to address feedback received from people that are using the facility specific to cardboard. There's been lots of confusion about cardboard. So we've switched the signage to simply read shipping boxes. It's virtually all we want, and that's the commodity that has most value. All of the other forms of cardboard, cereal boxes, etc., pizza boxes, pasta boxes, all of that stuff should be in the compostable waste stream. So globally, we're looking at generally the main waste stream coming in as 3 separate waste streams: recyclable, compostable, and then non-recyclable, non-compostable as the third. Compostable stream is literally anything and only anything that can compost, which includes food scraps, paper products, and some of the previously mentioned paper boxes and that sort of thing. Virtually everything else needs to go into this non-compostable, non-recyclable stream that gets combined with construction and demolition debris and diverted off island. If any of that stuff that is not recyclable and not compostable makes it into our compostable stream and goes through the composter, it comes out as a residual that gets separated off and ultimately makes it to our landfill. So every effort we can make to reduce that and divert it into this non-recyclable, non-compostable stream diverts that stream off island and really will help extend the life of the limited space we have for landfill. More to come tomorrow night at our session. I'll get into a little bit more detail, but we're developing some outreach with the town manager's office to enhance this in both English and Spanish, but with some pictures and some easy to read information to be available on the website and pushed out to our social media markets.
Sorry, Rob, will you be making any recommendations to people how to set up their home garbage system that would sort of facilitate what you're looking for?
So as an extension of our drop-off facility, recognizing that only about 25% of the waste stream comes into us from drop-off, the other 75 gets delivered to us by on-island haulers. There's going to be a significant effort to work with haulers to educate their customers. I'm not necessarily going to get into dictating people's homes and what they do at them, but we clearly would be able to give some guidance on how some people do it.
Rob, when will some of these changes, when will we see these?
The signage started, signage started to work today. Waste Options will ultimately set the program up, so Friday morning will be the first start of it. We've done outreach in the paper and further outreach here and tomorrow night. This isn't something that we're going to be expecting immediate change to. We recognize that there's a bit of education that's necessary, no different than any of the other changes that have taken place in recent months out there. But this is something that's been contemplated. It's rolling out with the best information that we have today. And this is really in reaction to a lot of the different operations and things happening both on island and off island. We'll get more into compostable plastics and other things down the road. We're happy to try.
That was going to be my question.
Sure, we'll try to.
What happens with those? Do they compost in our digester?
Sure. So we are conducting a pilot study with the cooperation of Waste Options, being supported by Remain in the end of February. So that will help us at least hopefully answer some of the questions about what our systems are capable of here on island, so we can make a better recommendation to people before summer hits. So I look forward to reporting back.
So you'll do a test and run it through and see
several
what
tests.
Happens. That would
yes.
be great. I was asking for that a number of years ago, and I couldn't believe that we couldn't track it. We can track a great white all through the ocean, and we couldn't track something through the digester. So I'm glad to hear we're going to try.
We're coming up with some creative ideas, so we're open to them.
Are we trying compostable trash bags as well?
We are.
Okay, great.
Finally, a note on personal responsibility, something that I continue to tout. Pack In, Pack Out is a program that we're exploring in various options or in different ways around the island, which is basically a version of carry in, carry out. You see at lots of properties off island. Essentially, it's being responsible for what you take to one of our public locations. We're exploring some remote beach locations where we currently provide trash cans year-round with very little year-round use. Some of these tend to get abused, and so I think we're interested in exploring, let's say, leaning on personal responsibility with some gentle reminders in the form of signage to be able to effectively remove trash cans from these locations, which end up, in a lot of cases, being windblown and ending up in our spaces we don't want them to be, including beaches, but not necessarily always beaches. Dunes.
Like when I go wilderness camping, like whatever you take in, you bring back.
Exactly. Along those lines, we are exploring trash can locations. Extensive trash cans exist downtown, and there's numerous instances where private trash from homes end up in these cans. So we've been tracking this. We've been tearing bags open, keeping names. We've finally notified a list of 50 people this past fall from that list, giving them a warning, letting them know that's a finable offense, and noting the locations. 2 such trash can locations have been removed to, again, eliminate the opportunity. And we've had really no pushback at all, no feedback to the office since. And finally, dog waste bags. I think I saw Greg here earlier. This man has, for the last 2 years, gone through hell dealing with this entire program, which is, in my opinion, ridiculous. The way that people treat this. In our case, as well as in Greg's case, the receptacles that take the dog waste that have the dog waste bags that would be filled by the town, within minutes, is completely emptied by people for their personal use. In addition, when they are used, we're finding them all over the place, not necessarily in the trash cans that are provided. And frankly, again, back to personal responsibility, the town doesn't own these dogs. The DPW doesn't own these dogs. These are personally owned by people and need to be something that they look after. They feed it. They need to look after the waste. So this will be coupled with sort of the stormwater management program, where dog waste messaging about stuff washing into the storm drains and ending up into sensitive receptors like our water systems will be coming down as well. So we'll talk more about that. Just a few updates.
I'm just curious, what's the fine for private dumping? And
Chief, is that a $200 fine? Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'd be curious. I'm impressed that you did that. That you contacted the people, and I'm sure that was an eye opener.
We got some good feedback. A few of them reached out to us, so it was good to have some back and forth to understand the mentality of where people are at. And I think it was done respectfully, and it's with notice, and we're just.
I've had the same issue at Something Natural with a few neighbors who are leaving, heading to the boat, and they come by and fill up my garbage cans for the customers and head out. And I've had to go knock on the door and say, could you please not do that? If you want to use my recycle bins or my dumpster, you can, just ask, but don't, fill up the bins to start the day. And I just thought they weren't even thinking about it. And when I said it, they apologized, and they just didn't realize.
For us, we've witnessed, so from Public Works, we'll be picking up something and have a run through town, and this is generally in the very busy time of summer. And I've witnessed this, other people have witnessed it, where the crew will come by, empty a barrel, and 5 minutes later, someone walks out and fills that to the brim with household trash bags. In the case where we get phone calls from town management, who gets phone calls that these bins are overwhelmed and overflowing when they've literally been picked up 15 minutes before that. So this is sort of, it's frustrating for our staff, who also, they're trying to do a good job, and they're getting called back to locations and having to, redo the work, but also feel like people are interpreting what they're doing as not being done timely or keeping up with. So it's good for them to also to understand that people are paying attention and sort of standing up for the hard work that they put in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is that all, Libby?
That's all. Yep.
On to the select board reports comments. First item, discussion regarding Steamship Authority comment request on Sea Streak ferry license change, request to add fast ferry service in November and December 2019.
So this came in. I don't know if Rob wants to say anything about it, but we just got it as a courtesy to see if the board had any comments about this additional service. Sea Streak needs to go to the steamship to get this sort of license amendment for some additional service at those times. We sought out any comment from the Chamber of Commerce and Culture and Tourism, and both seem to support this. So I don't know what would be more helpful, no comment at all or a supportive comment.
Well, Sea Streak, as you know, provides service from New Bedford to Nantucket on a seasonal basis, and they are interested in doing the Christmas stroll and Thanksgiving weekend. These have become very busy weekends. They are probably one of the last shots in the arm for businesses going through the winter season. And we have, along with Highline, have had a hard time meeting demand in the last few years over these busy weekends, mostly because people tend to arrive not on Friday, but on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, excuse me, and then they all leave on Sunday, which is problematic because we have no idea, no way of knowing how many people we're going to get showing up on Sunday, and the Highline has the same problem. So this is just another option for people. New Bedford is kind of a weird option for us because we're used to going to Hyannis, but there are people that come from Connecticut, New York area that don't mind stopping in New Bedford, taking a 2-hour boat ride, and not having to drive to Hyannis. So this is a good thing. It's only 2 round trips a day that they're requesting, and I don't believe we've received any public comment at all on this. So, I think it's a good thing.
Any comments, questions?
It's not related to the expansion of the service, but I did know that there seems to be some confusion in the summertime about where the Sea Streak is going to be docking. Sometimes it's at the slow boat terminal, sometimes it's at the fast boat, and then then we have the cardboard signs. Maybe they're coming from the dump as part of recycling, and at Sea Streak this way, and it's just it's not professional. It's confusing to the passengers.
It is confusing. It's still a relatively new service. It's only been in place for a couple of years. One of their problems is they have to work around the steamship's schedule. So there are times when our fast boat is in and their boat is coming in, and they can't use the same slip, obviously. So there is a little back and forth. I think they've gotten better about their signage and letting people know where they are. But yes, that's an ongoing problem.
So it will continue not being able to predict what terminal.
Well, in this case, I think that it'll be set. I don't know exactly based on.
I mean, during the regular season, they're still going to go back. They're still going to be using both docks.
Well, primarily they do use the slow boat slip for the majority of their trips. Okay. But there are times when there's a conflict with our boat, so they has to, it's up in the air.
Any other questions? Do we need a motion? Support? No?
Whatever you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Just a comment. I think this is great. I just wanted to just a general comment, and that I think when we have another boat coming here, is often the idea that people are just walking off and walking around the town, and at the same time they're also potentially renting a car and driving around our streets. And I just say it might be useful for the board to think about trying to incentivize people to maybe bring a bicycle as a mode of transportation. So maybe a reduced fee for folks coming over, or not charging for bicycles as you come over might be a useful mechanism, not only for Sea Streak but for the other boats as well going on into the future. So just a thought. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments on that?
No.
We're going to move on to adoption of 2019 annual town meeting and or election warrant. Two items to discuss among others, but short-term rental tax, and then the ballot questions. Do you want to start with the short-term rental tax? Did you want to go another route, Libby?
No, I was just would mention that there are 3 outstanding items for the board's determination. This article, not 3 new things have happened since last week. Some additional discussion about this particular article. A warrant article on a debt exclusion has been added for the acquisition of property at 1 Miller's Lane, and I'm not sure how we're going to finish off the noise bylaw. That's sort of outstanding a little bit. So with regard to the short-term rental tax, I think you heard from the finance director last week that there's a potential concern or issue with the Department of Revenue as to the 4% number and what that might mean later in the year for town revenue, and the possibility that our budget would have to be amended, which was starting to sound very problematic. So I think the recommendation of town administration is to not have an article, and that would effectively leave the tax for the moment at 6% and revisit this in the fall when we maybe have a better idea of what's come in.
Did Brian get any more information this week? You were going to try to see if you could pin somebody down.
No, they haven't. They actually have not released the IGR, and they're not going to go on record until they've finalized what they're formally going to release. So I would expect that it's not going to change significantly from what I discussed with you last week.
Anybody from the public like to speak on this?
Ken Bogrand, just one comment. I recognize the importance of the financial stability with the plan and the budget for the town. And so from the point of view of the real estate industry, we're not going to suggest anything other than understanding that this is something that we need to do in order to protect the town's financial stability and its budget. But what is really frustrating to me as an individual is we have a part of the government that passes legislation that gives us the right as a town to make our own determination with respect to a local option. And then we have an administrative part of the government that takes it away from us before we even have an opportunity to make a determination. It just seems really a wrong way to do it, but I guess that's the way the sausage is made. So I understand that this is something that needs to be done and is important for the town to do, and we support that. But we still want you, as you think about this issue, to consider the fact of the people that are really affected by it, the local part of the community that is going to be significantly impacted by the amount of the tax. And I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ken. Anyone else like to speak on this? I had one thing to read. Dawn sent me an email. She couldn't be here today. Dawn said, in the light of the new information from DOR on our budget projections, I find that we cannot lower the tax for this year. We could in the future once we have better data if we find it is impacting our tourism. I hope that we can keep the overall tax at 11.7% and not institute the additional 2.75% for the Waterways Fund. I think we should consider a stabilization fund for affordable housing, but I am more comfortable with pursuing that at a future town meeting once we have more data on the overall revenue that will be generated. That's from Dawn. Your thoughts from the board?
My position is still the same as it has been the past 2 weeks. One thing that, in speaking to a couple of people, and Mr. Bogrand brought it up at one of the meetings, that in the future, I think there had been some discussion initially for some sort of exemption for primary ownership. So some of the people that will be impacted by this might be some of the people that are renting out a room, one room in their primary ownership house through Airbnb, something like that. In future, I would like to consider looking at some of the ways that we can protect some of those owners, property owners. But at this time, I still think that we should be, at this stage, taking the recommendation of town administration.
So, I certainly was in favor of reducing it to 4%. I agree with Ken that this seems to be unconscionable, but it's government. I don't think it's worth the risk that the DOR will tell us to reduce our revenue or approved revenue from room tax. So I agree that we should keep it as it is and bring it up for a conversation at a fall town meeting.
A question on that fall town meeting, is that going to be, if that's early October, is that enough time to even get the data?
I mean, I don't know, but I mean,
But that's what I'm asking for somebody to maybe speak on that.
It potentially could be from the perspective that the September payment and then the either November or December payment, it eludes me right now, are the two largest payments from room occupancy that we get. We collect probably 92% of the total year in those two payments. So with the September payment, we would have an idea potentially what it would look like. And we probably could do a better job of understanding. We'd have a better ability to predict what it might be for the next 3-month period, which would help us and would enable us to make a better case than we'd be able to make now if we made a change.
So could one course be, we put a placeholder? When do we have to have articles in for a special?
Well, we haven't even decided if we're having a special yet.
Let's assume that we are.
Potentially. I can't even begin to think about that right at the moment.
But let me ask you just, if it's, let's just say it's October 1st, is it
We're
months before
we're going to start talking about this in June.
June, okay. Just keep that in the back of our minds.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I'll support the recommendations. I didn't want to, and I worry about the impacts that this may have. But at the same time, and I think if we, when we look at this, we should be thinking about stabilization funds, for anything over the amount that we need, to budget, to balance it, because that gives us more control and for housing or for infrastructure, put it away, for a rainy day, because I think that we're heading into a not so great period potentially, and I think it's smart to have those sort of financial savings set aside. That it helps us soften the impact on taxpayers for all these other issues that we're going to have to deal with, rather than spend it year to year and then be scrambling. So I hope that when we talk about it, we're really thinking that way.
I think town administration's recommendation is the smart, responsible, safe route right now. And I do like some type of stabilization fund. It's a 2/3 vote to get it out, but that's safe, whether it's for housing or capital or.
And then you have to make your pitch and make a good pitch.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yep. Pleasure of the board.
I move that we remove, is it article, I don't remember, we remove it, was it article 32?
Yep. Yes. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes 4-0. Any other comments on short-term rentals? Okay. We want to move on to 1 Miller's Lane, Nantucket Inn.
Sure. So there is an article in the warrant for the acquisition. There's a corresponding debt exclusion as well, and there has been some discussion this week about with the property owner of 1 Miller Lane and working towards a potential purchase and sale that would be contingent on the approval of an appropriation. So that is how that article is written.
Any comments from the board or the public on this? Questions? Yeah. Come on up, Rick.
Well, my name's Rick Atherton. Just to state the obvious, I think, what are we up to? I mean, here we are. We don't know if it costs $2 or 20 million or 100 million, and we don't know what you're going to do with it. And I'm just getting started. So my reaction to putting something like this in the warrant without anything at all before the public, before you guys vote to put it in, and put a debt exclusion on the ballot, it just, I'm puzzled, quite frankly. I know, for example, this may be getting ahead of myself tonight, but in terms of the ballot issues, I think the article to have dispersed affordable housing by buying single-family units meets a lot of the community's needs. And I assume, but I don't know, I think looking at this, you're not proposing a ballot question in case town meeting supports that article. And I think if that's correct, then you're making the decision, in effect, to defer that possibility for a long time. And I would ask you to consider putting that on the ballot and skip this one until we know what we're up to. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I hear what Mr. Atherton is saying about the public. This came up quite quickly, I think, and Tucker's prepared, I think, to say what some of the immediate benefits or the benefits of the purchase of the property could provide.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this came up within the last week, basically, and it's sort of a rare opportunity to potentially get us over the top, actually, of our 10% requirement ultimately, given Richmond moving forward and Six Fairgrounds and so forth. So there no doubt is a lot of due diligence still to go into this process, and this is here as a placeholder at the moment. But we've had the opportunity to reach out to all of the abutting neighbors to let them know this is something that we're looking at. We'll be holding some public information forums as we take in ideas, questions, concerns, criticisms, all of the above, and we go through the due diligence process. But this could be a rare opportunity that at town meeting and then again at the ballot, we may decide this is worthwhile.
Yeah, this fell in our laps, at least from that I knew about it 6 days ago. So it does seem like we're just throwing this all together. And we haven't known for a long time. And so I think it's a good opportunity, but there's a lot of questions. So a lot of the discussion has been with, the other article that's up there for 30 million. Do we put this placeholder up? Do we try to combine it into, your article that Tobias and Mr. Atherton put in? And there's been a lot of discussion on that in a short amount of time. Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I'm worried that if we put two articles of this magnitude, both for housing up, that one or both of them won't pass. What I suggested, or have suggested to at least one member is, I think to Libby as well, is can we support Toby and Rick's article 100%? Put that on the ballot, make sure it passes, and then if we do our due diligence on this, and this change the wording on Toby's and Rick's if we have to, so that if we do our due diligence and this ends up to be at the top of the pile, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund thinks it is, they give us the, sort of the plan and the details, operating plan and everything, and we agree with them that it's, what the homework that's been done makes sense, then we pull the trigger on this. If we don't, then we still have the 30 million to do the dispersed plan. And then we'd be focusing on one, we'd be focused on housing, saying we're putting $30 million toward housing. I think that would be a more responsible path to get one of them, to get to do one thing. And so that, so that's my, that would be my strategy to try to get one thing to pass. I think if we put both on and both on the ballot, I think it's going to get really confusing. So.
In regards to the ballot question, though, if we were to get behind Tobias's and Rick's article, that would have to be amended on the floor to allow a project like Nantucket Inn, correct?
However, it would have to be amended, yeah.
And then
I'm not town council, but yeah, I would assume we could do that.
And then the ballot question, then at this stage, we still really wouldn't be able to write that ballot question that would still have to come at a subsequent special election, correct?
I'm guessing that we could write it because a lot of times they don't even have they're convoluted and they don't even really say what they say anyway. So I'm assuming we could, but maybe I'm wrong.
Libby and Andrew.
I'm not very clear exactly on what specifically is being proposed, but the board, I mean, if the board wanted to have 2 debt exclusions on now, you could do that. It has never been the board's practice to put any ballot questions on in anticipation of a citizen warrant article, or of course concurrent with a citizen warrant article. So that would be a bit of a departure from prior practice, which is fine. If you leave it with the 1, it's up to the board to put ballot questions on election warrants. So you would, if you wished to, if the Tobias article passed, the 30 million at town meeting, and the board wished to put a ballot question on, you could do that, but it would necessitate calling a special election.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting is that we do 1 article and 1 ballot question. However, and we don't specify it only be Miller Lane. I think we specify a number that would cover Miller Lane or cover joint housing. I'm afraid that if we go for 2 things, it'll be like going for 5 roundabouts, that it'll be defeated. So I'm trying to think of how do we combine it.
One question that I would have is the unique nature of 1 Miller's Lane is that in addition to, let's just say, effectively twice the number of units that are contemplated under the citizen article, it also lends itself to potentially other municipal purposes in its current state. And I don't know the answer to whether the citizen article, I mean, it's form over substance. I mean, like, I'm concerned about being able to achieve what the board wants to achieve and the community wants to achieve here. But my concern with this going on the citizen article horse would be, would it be deemed to be within the scope of the original article if Miller's Lane had purposes in addition to housing? And I don't know the answer to how that would get interpreted.
Rita, do you have something too?
Can go, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, again, I think the scope article, if you leave them separate, a lot of things are going to happen. I mean, I say to people who ask me about our article, and most people are quite favorable. Not everybody, but most are. I say I would rather vote for dispersed affordable housing units than vote for roundabouts, just to give you a sense of how important I think maintaining the character of our neighborhoods is. It's for the whole community to benefit. Okay, I mean, I think that's really critical here. If you want to do something along the lines of what Matt was talking about, I think the board should write the article. You can take our article, incorporate what it says, and add to it. Then the scope is all-encompassing. Otherwise, our article isn't going to work for scope. I'm sure that's a pretty clear understanding. But you have the ability to write an article. It's still going to be very difficult, I think, to get Miller's Lane. I'm just giving you my take here. Passed. It's complicated. It's all kinds of things going on, municipal purposes, affordable housing. It bookmarks Evergreen and Daffodil on both ends by those kinds of affordable housing density issues. And maybe everybody's happy. I don't know. But that's a suggestion for you if you want to follow Matt's idea. Thank you.
Rita, you have something?
Well, I have a question. We don't really have time to write a whole other article, do we?
Well, it would be very difficult since this has already been put off 2 weeks.
I just want to, I suppose, really speak in support of 1 Miller's Lane, and I completely understand Mr. Atherton's concerns. I understand your concerns, Matt. I think that this is the nature of real estate, and we haven't had a chance to really digest what is the best way. I see a lot of potential at this property. It may not work. We have a lot of due diligence to do. I think having a placeholder here gives us the opportunity to do that due diligence, and we can always take it off if we need to. It sounds like if we take it off and Tobias's and Rick's goes ahead, then we still have to have a special election regardless, because we wouldn't be writing a ballot question for that now anyways. So I just think that it gives us the options to have it there, and this may or may not be the way to get it. But the one thing I'll say is that a year ago, the thought of putting $600,000 towards Affordable Housing Trust was a discussion, and we're now talking about 27, 30 million. So I think that the scale that we're talking about is radically different, and it's going to be a shocking conversation regardless, and I think we do need to have the conversation at this level. So I'd be more in favor of having the placeholder here, have it on the ballot question. If we decide to take it off, we take it off. But it gives us options.
I think we have to be, and again, we have to be very careful, because it is going to be shocking, and I think you're going to be shocked at the people who do not want to spend money on affordable housing. They don't think the town should be in the housing business, and I don't agree with that, but I think there's more people than you would think that are like that, and I think it's a slap in the face to put two of them at that level. And I think they're both going to go down. I feel really strongly about it. I know I'm probably going to lose this tonight, but I think strategically, I think we're making a huge mistake, not rewriting it like Rick said, and making it one article that can do both purposes, and the top one will rise to the surface. Then I think we have a 60-40 chance of getting it through. If we have two of them, I don't think we have a chance. And so it's because I support it, I'm arguing this strongly.
Hi, Brooke Moore, Vice Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. I had the opportunity to tour the property yesterday, and I think the most compelling thing to me visually that's hard to understand about this property is it accomplishes the goal of creating affordable housing without building another structure. This exists. It's a repurpose of use. It's in great shape, as we could see as we reviewed it with the property manager, and this is a once in a generation, if not forever, given the cost of construction on Nantucket, opportunity for us for affordable housing, and it is a big leap. It's a big leap of faith. It's a big number, but I cannot. It is a compelling piece of property, and it has other alternative uses with the main hotel structure as well. So I would really hate for us to lose the opportunity. At the very least, we should keep a placeholder so this can move forward in this time frame. I realize it's a rush, it's a lot of work, but we are poised and ready to get that work done between now and town meeting. So I would appreciate having this placeholder left so that we don't pass up a once in a lifetime opportunity for the affordable housing efforts on Nantucket. Thank you.
Tobias Glidden again. Thank you everyone for having this discussion. Just a couple general thoughts. One is maybe 10 years ago there was a discussion about the Nantucket Hotel. It was in rough shape, once in a lifetime opportunity to purchase. Could have been great for affordable housing. There was a conversation about it being used for affordable housing. It wasn't, and now it's a hotel, and that's, I think, a great thing. I think we should be very clear that, as soon as you guys sign off on the warrant, we start, as a community, and I'm assuming the town, is going to aim to try to sell the items they place on the warrant. I do not understand how the board wants to be in the position of being support of two articles. That seems like it's going to be incredibly challenging to get both passed. Just one point. Secondly, myself and others have
been looking to have a conversation with the finance committee. I've met with several members on the side about the article that Rick and I drafted. We've had some really good positive feedback about the scope of our article. I'd love to maybe share a little bit more about the context of that because I think it's important. I was hoping to do that at a later date, but I'd love just to take a moment because I think this is important to explain a little bit about that. So over the last year, in conjunction with some other folks on the island, I looked at about 100 properties or so that were sold in 2018. And I went through and I selected 11 properties that you could take and purchase under $1.5 million. All of them have at least 2 units on them with a total purchase price of about $13 to $14 million, and including some improvements, either adding an apartment or adding a little cottage. What that does is it gets you to your 24 units to meet your shy list. And that does it, you can accomplish that mixed site for, under $13 million. So just to give you a bit of a context, that's a house in Sconset, that's a house in Nantucket, that's some housing in the Mid-Island, that's a house in Tom Nevers, that's mixed site. So just to give you a little context of what the article Rick and I drafted looks like. Looking into 2019, as houses come online in the spring to be sold, the town could potentially be in the position going into the fall to purchase various parcels across the island once we get a program in place. Lastly, one of the things I've heard this evening is that Miller's Lane is a great opportunity for the town. I'd like to know just ballpark, if we had to spend tens of millions of dollars to fix up the Nantucket Hotel, what are we going to need to spend to fix up the Nantucket Inn? We're going to buy this property and then what? It's going to be apartments? Like, as far as I understand, they're hotel rooms. Am I clear about that? I haven't toured the building. Are they all hotel rooms?
Yes.
Yeah.
They would have to be changed over to become apartments.
Yeah. So like beyond that, we'd need to be, I think the board, if that's part of the conversation, should be thinking about funding an article, if you want to purchase Miller's Lane, to change over those apartments. That would be a logical assumption in my mind to pursue. And that being said, I don't think the due diligence has been done at this time to put forward 2 articles and watch them both fail. So thank you.
Tucker.
Again, to some degree, I'm agnostic. Like, I'm about making happen what the community would like to and needs to have happen. But I heard a great quote from a new, early announced presidential candidate the other day about basically having more faith in the voters. And I think that applies here. I think we're basically saying, some of the comments earlier, that, well, we're going to confuse the voters, or, this is a disservice to them. I think it's a disservice perhaps not to, have both of these on there. And yeah, the due diligence is not done, given it only came to us a week ago. But by the time town meeting comes around, I think we all will have done enough of our own homework, the due diligence, and have a good, robust discussion. And by that point, one or the other things may have come to light where it essentially falls off. So at this point, I don't see any downside to keeping a placeholder.
Go ahead, Rita.
I just wanted to say as well that, I think that I'm a little bit intrigued by the rewriting of an article, but I feel like we're under pressure to do it well. I do think the leadership could and should come from the board at this stage. And I'm still listening intently to the sort of the fleshing out of Tobias and Rick's article as well. I'm not sure that I fully understand exactly how that will work. So I think that, at this stage, neither of these are fully fleshed out. And again, I do take to heart Tobias's point about the needs for renovations, the additional cost. I don't think any of us here are, thinking that that isn't part of the conversation. That is part of the due diligence, but I do think it is worth a chance.
I think the timing of this is really difficult. If we had known about this 3 months ago, we'd have done our due diligence, we'd have been very comfortable going forward or not. I'm in favor of keeping it or putting it on the warrant, and then really doing our due diligence and putting as much resources that we can, whether it's town admin or with Tucker and planning, as much as we can. And then if we need to take it off, we might go that route. For me, it's too early to tell, but I 100% agree with, I think the first thing I said, and I said this to Tobias when we first talked about it, was I fear both of them failing.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we take one off, the other one fails because people are confused. And that is a reality, I think. But if we don't explore this, and to me, it's not just an affordable housing opportunity, it's other things. And nobody wants to say anything, because then people will attach on to it, whether it's something for a certain community or another municipal use that we could potentially spend 10, 15, $20 million on that could go in this space. Right? It's 4.5 acres. That's already been developed.
Here's what I'm suggesting, though, and what Rick refined it. What I'm suggesting is we'll do both. We'll do just that. I'm suggesting have faith in the Affordable Trust Fund, and I don't think either are going to have enough work done by town meeting to be able to tell us exactly how we're going to change one building and into something else, or which exact houses would we buy spread around the island. Neither of those will we know. So you'll have two things competing, one maybe not on the ballot. I'm saying combine them to one $30 million article and have faith that we will do the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, coming to us after, will do the right thing for the town. That's how I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it completely from that standpoint of, one article, $30 million. If this is the great deal that it is, it gets negotiated, it gets researched, and that's what happens. And Rick and Toby are right on board saying this is great, if it's such a great deal. But if we hit a snag along the way, then we're back to town meeting next year trying again. I think, and I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I just strategically, I felt after we sort of learned about it, I went home and I started thinking about it, and I sort of texted Jason right away. I'm like, Jason, I think we're in trouble if we do two. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Jim.
This board has for the last several years been reluctant to fund, and although this isn't a direct funding of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, trust fund, because we've said, show us your plan, and this opportunity came through members of that fund, the trust fund, and it's a appealing plan. I personally think it's very transparent. We want to acquire a piece of property that eventually will have certain uses, including affordable housing. I also think it's appropriate to have a conversation at town meeting, not just about affordable housing, but the two different options: a concentrated affordable housing, such as Miller's Lane, or a dispersed affordable housing process as suggested by Toby, by the Citizen Warrant article. So I think it makes perfect sense to keep the two, and I trust the voters too. And I think it's a big leap, either one of them, but I think it's important, and I think we should continue to keep them as separate, and maybe as a separate conversation we can talk about a ballot question for the citizen article. I'd certainly be open to that conversation if we keep the two articles on the warrant. So I'd make a motion that we add the article as outlined here to the town warrant.
Can I ask a question? Would that be the article and the debt exclusion question?
Yes.
Both? Okay.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries 3-1.
And I don't know if it's within our agenda, but the conversation, I'd be interested in hearing Rick's perspective about a debt exclusion or ballot question on the citizen article.
Well, could I just go back to that? Because I don't, once we leave this meeting, it's probably not coming back. So right now you have one ballot question. Right. So, the other one, if you put it on, then you can really have a discussion at town meeting that can be followed through with a ballot. But frankly, I think we're headed for difficulty. And I would just remind us all about the thorough analysis and heavy discussion for 6 months about the Westmore Club. And if you all don't know about that, I suggest you go back and take it up and research what happened to that opportunity as well.
And there were tours and cookies and everything there.
Yeah, we tried cookies. I wasn't so much in favor of it at that time, but many members of the board were. And it was a very active, strong selling position and leadership from the board that wanted to buy the Westmore Club property, the opportunity of a lifetime. And sometimes opportunities come to you for a reason, and just be wary.
So I didn't hear an interest on the citizen sponsors to add a ballot question.
Yeah, so just I'll be very clear about it. I would like you to add a ballot question for this year's town meeting. If you fail to do so, you're very clearly you're creating a scenario where if you have one ballot question at this year's town meeting, folks are going to go ahead and vote for that one, and then who knows where we are in the fall. So I think if it's going to be about giving people an opportunity to have a discussion between the two, as Jim mentioned, put both on there.
What do we think about that?
I'll make a motion to add a ballot question for both articles, for their article.
I'll second that.
You need to. I have a discussion. Libby, how does this work? Where we'd come back next week and prove it again?
If you're okay with us getting the wording from town council, we can add it.
Okay. Is everybody okay with it?
Yes.
I just what are the unintended consequences of doing that, Libby? You said we haven't done it in the past. Other than that, what worries you when we contemplate such action?
Well, I think you want to be clear that it's not your normal practice to do this. Maybe this is unusual enough of a circumstance that you are. It's an unusual enough of a circumstance to do it.
All right. But nothing else, like you.
Not really.
Okay.
There's a lot of money on here.
Right. Okay.
And that I think the unintended consequences was what I was hoping to avoid. I think that people are going to see it, and half are going to not. They are going to vote against one, and half are going to vote against the other, and both will fail.
Well,
So
we'll
that's
find,
so that I understand. We'll find
know.
out, but that's the unintended consequences. I think that we're putting both of them at jeopardy. So
But that's not, is that related to the ballot question? That's
yes, yes.
So
it is.
you're, but
saying
you're in favor of the second
I'm in favor of
ballot
I'm in favor of the ballot question, regardless, because I think but I think that we're put by having two competing articles in the same high cost ballpark. I think we're putting housing itself in jeopardy, and so. But I do think that people will want a choice, and it may turn out that this is what their article is what people want, and maybe we'll get one of them through. But I just, I was around for Westmore, and I was around for some of these other issues, and it doesn't always go the way we think it goes. There's a whole different mindset, out in the community,
Right.
And I think that sometimes we're too close to it. So.
That's why we leave it up to the voters, and the reason I proposed adding it to the ballot question, I think just for equanimity, I think it's if we really want a discussion at town meeting about the two options, and the third option is no, I think both of them have to be in a position where we can move forward.
I have another thought. You could also separate the two warrants, the election warrant from the annual town meeting warrant, and adopt it as a separate warrant. So you don't necessarily have to finish off the ballot question, the second ballot question tonight. I don't know if you want another board member here for that discussion, but we're under the gun to get the warrant out and, the annual town meeting warrant out and published and all of that. But the election warrant has a little bit of a different timing. And it's going to mean separate voter registration sessions, but that's not the end of the world. And I'd rather get the ballot question correct.
I'm comfortable moving forward today. So
I think it's not a bad idea to if we approve the warrant tonight and then approve the election warrant or next week.
But
is that that's what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying that's another option.
Right.
Yeah.
So what? Okay. Well,
It just gives a little more time to.
In the downside of having another week.
The only downside, I think, is that we would have to have a separate voter registration session. But it's
could you repeat that? A separate what?
voter registration session. It's the town clerk's voter registration.
Okay.
But they'd still both be on the same. They'd be on the same ballot at the same time.
So,
Correct.
The town meeting warrant has all the town meeting articles on it, and the election warrant sets up the ballot for the annual town election. So they're not on the same.
I understand, but if we put two things on the ballot, they'll both be on the same ballot.
Oh,
Correct?
right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's all
yes,
I want
yes.
to make sure.
Would there be? It sounds like there's the town election warrant, and then there's the town meeting ballot
meeting
question. And I think they should be. I think they should all be on one. I think the affordable housing should be on the same warrant and not be part of the town election warrant.
I was just going to make one other comment. So you could have a special town meeting. I'm not sure this is a good idea, but there you go, Libby.
No, sorry, I've completely confused
Never mind.
the entire thing. When we know that we are going to have warrant articles that are contingent upon ballot questions, we have been adopting one warrant with the town meeting articles and basically the ballot questions on one document. Okay. We don't have to do that. Right. We can adopt them as separate documents. That doesn't mean anything except they're just adopted on different days.
Okay. To the public, there's no,
seamless.
they're not going to know a difference except the registration.
The only difference that they might know is that, and we could just, is that the ballot questions, now I'm probably going to confuse it even more. Since it's one document, it would all get published in the paper at the same time. There's no requirement for that at all. So people just, however, all of the warrant articles specifically say this is contingent upon a ballot vote. Mm-hmm. So they will eventually see it at the ballot. You follow?
And it's all on the same ballot.
The questions that we're talking about here,
yeah.
Yes, they would all be on the same ballot. No change to the warrant, the town meeting warrant.
No, but no. I mean, when I look at a ballot, it's got both affordable housings right next to each other, not on a separate page.
Do you mean these two, the articles that you're talking, these two
the
ballot
citizen
questions
article and the Miller's Lane article?
What the public would see, what the public would do in the booth. That's what
They would both be on the same warrant, or on the both same election warrant that you go in and you get and you vote on. It wouldn't be two separate.
Right. It's not under separate columns or separate.
No. The only big thing right now is, besides the voter registration, is just that when the paper comes out next week and you have the town meeting insert, the ballot questions won't be in it.
Won't.
Because if you adopt it as a separate document and you vote on it next week, it'll be past the time. I have to get this to the paper.
Oh, so we're gonna
week.
adopt all of the ballot questions, not just the citizen article ballot question. Is that what you're saying? Yes. As a separate warrant.
That's what, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought it was like, okay, we're going to do all the ballot questions, but we're going to leave the citizen article separate.
No.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm just
Makes
saying
sense.
to make sure that we want the wording
Sorry,
correct, and if you want the other board member here.
So the ballot questions would go on the following week in the paper? This wouldn't be all together?
It doesn't even have to go in the paper.
Okay.
We've
But if we adopt it tonight, then it will can go in the paper.
It can, but if we want,
and that might be a step to do, so there isn't as much confusion. So people, if they actually read their,
I agree.
If they read
Let's-
it, they can say, here they are, and look,
I think we should
here's
do
what
it.
it matches up with. I mean, I think if we don't do it now, it will make it even harder for people to figure out which end is up. So, anyway. And I'm happy adopting it with town council writing it properly.
I'm just saying, it's a bit of a rush job because it also has to go through bond council, and that's a little more time consuming.
We need, obviously, town council to help write it, but then we need to get it cleared by bond council, and that isn't always within 2 minutes. It could take a little time depending on what they're doing, so.
So it wouldn't necessarily get published anyways next week? Is that what we're saying, even if we adopted it tonight?
We need to get it approved somehow by bond council, make it to the paper a little bit later. But it'll be in the paper next week, God willing.
I'm okay approving it with town council's recommendation on writing it, and I'm in favor of having the two on the ballot.
Me too. So.
Tucker, do you have anything before we make a motion?
I just was going
We
to say,
got a motion
I
on
think
the
it's a good idea to have both.
Jim?
We have a motion on the table.
Oh,
Yeah.
already-
It's been moved and seconded. We're under
We were
discussion.
discussing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous.
Yep. Unanimous.
You had that one last article, right, to discuss?
Oh, sorry, the noise bylaw,
Yeah.
I thought there might be some board direction on that.
I thought Dawn was going to.
Don was our fearless leader on that one.
She
She
may
got
have
sick
gotten, yeah.
Because she's ill. Yeah, so.
She,
It was too complicated for me last week.
I think we were close
Okay.
last week, though.
I'm going to go.
It was, some of the adjustments were more just about the timing for more of the DIY projects as opposed to the construction projects, I believe.
Does anybody remember what we were deciding on?
We were
what was the
just-
last thing?
As far as I remember, we were deciding on the time change for the first part. If I pull it up, I'll.
I think it was timing and what it applied to were the two things.
Yeah.
It was what exactly was the definition of what it was going to apply to, and what was the timing.
And one had to do with construction, and one was the domestic power tools. And I think the idea is the domestic power tools would be more, wouldn't be as restricted. Yeah, so the domestic power tools will change from 8 to 10. I think that was what I remember we were talking about.
Chief, as is any issues? Nope. You brought up a couple things. But that was changed, I believe. Erica?
I was just actually, when I was looking at this article the other day, I was hoping that you would be okay with just some slight changes to the article, but they're not substantive. It would be like, instead of writing out 8 p.m., you put in colon 00. You put it in time
Yes.
because that's how the bylaw currently states it. So I just want to keep it consistent with how it's currently written.
And I think that also will help people understand exactly. It's a little confusing as it is right now.
So if you'd be okay with that.
I would.
Yes. Well, if the changes were made that we spoke about last week.
Well, and if they're not, if they, aren't more restrictive, we'll talk about it at town meeting floor.
Right.
Mhm.
So.
Mhm.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Oh. I'll second for discussion.
Okay.
I'd like to hear.
Oops.
Just out of Thomas Barrett, just out of curiosity, could there be an exemption during a weather-related emergency? You have yard tools in there and something else, but in the winter, maybe like snow throwers might be running late for whatever reason, or I don't know, we get a ton of rain and we got to run generators to pump out basements or something like that. I mean, would that be considered to be able to be put in there as an exemption if it was a declared weather related or something? Like, I'm just looking out because you know how things happen here, and all of a sudden, we're pressed to get stuff done, and people are like, no, you can't. But if we,
yeah, Erica,
I would say that a generator and a snow blower aren't even domestic power tools or construction. I mean,
some people would say, I mean,
they're not listed specifically within the definitions here. We've never outlawed them.
No, I understand, but I mean, it says lawn or garden tool, so I mean, it's generic. I'm just.
I'd have a little faith that if we were
stretching.
I think if we had a hurricane or some other issue coming
No,
on,
I know, but
I would have faith that they wouldn't be putting you in jail over it.
I know, but it comes down to that one person, and then all of a sudden you're,
I know, but then they turn around and say, hey, we're having a hurricane.
I know, but I'm just, bringing it up because it's, as everybody knows, it's in the details.
No, I know.
Again, it hasn't been an issue to date. People use generators all the time when we lose power. People don't, I don't know of a single noise complaint that's ever been filed because somebody's running a generator when there's no power. So I don't think you really need to worry about those instances.
All right. Chief's shaking his head too.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Thomas. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 4-0. Anything else with this? Libby? It has been we've had full adoption.
Did you already vote it?
We just
Full?
We did the noise.
They just voted those 3 items.
Okay, so you should probably just adopt the whole thing.
Make a motion to adopt the warrant.
Second.
And just to be clear, it's the town meeting and election warrant, right?
Yes, town meeting
Town
and
meeting
election.
and election.
Is there a second? Is it you, Jim?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. All right, moving on to report on Massachusetts Municipal Association Annual Conference. Who wants to go first?
I'll start. So this is my first year going. I thought it was excellent. As many people pointed out, it's as much the workshops and speakers that you go to as the other people that you meet there in the trade show. So I went to workshops on recycling, energy efficiency, and zoning for aging in place. And I think my biggest takeaways really and truly were the zoning for aging in place. I was hoping to get a little bit more inspiration for some of the things that we're talking about around Ireland Home. What I realized is that we actually have a lot of the zoning already in place, but we really look at it through workforce housing. And I've noticed, I met someone from a council on aging from another town. I think a lot of the things that we are doing, we haven't really looked at the aging in place on Nantucket, and the sort of the scope and the depth of that to me is probably something that needs to be a goal and a future strategic plan. But I'm hoping that despite that, we can still maybe have a little more conversation with our council on aging and be a little more aware of some of the things that we can do to be age and dementia friendly, which, as a note, all of the towns on Martha's Vineyard are get their purple stars for being age and dementia friendly. Also, the state has quite a few resources to avail of. The other one, actually, sorry, I brought maps. The big takeaway for me, and I mentioned it last week, was coming across this at the trade show, the organization that does maps for a lot of consultants like Malone and McBroom. And I just wanted to hand out the Climate Smart Cities Boston maps that really caught my eye as what I would like to see come out of our coastal resiliency plan. And what it is doing is mapping your most vulnerable areas, helping you to prioritize, and then helping you decide where to invest. And I think that's what we need to be looking at. So there's one for, I'll take one for Libby, one for everyone there, and yeah. So that was me.
Just, I went to the session on municipal finance, and I thought I was pretty impressed with the presentation by the folks from the DOR until I heard about the frustration that we're hearing about the short-term rental tax. I will say that there were, from the questions in the audience, there's a lot of communities and who are really concerned with the clarity among these regulations, especially around marijuana and around the short-term rental tax. So I think the folks from the state got that message. The other comment was we had a kind of a keynote address from a speaker who really talked about public service and about how kind of we're called to public service, and it really hit home with me. And I remember last week Marianne had her editorial kind of a call to action on the part of the community for people to come forward and participate in public service. We had a conversation last week at this meeting about the Africa Meeting House and the tragedy there, and our and the community's response to that, and also I think so. It's really led me to thinking in my own mind about how do we encourage people of color, minorities, immigrants to be more active in in public service to the town of Nantucket. So that's something that kind of a takeaway was kind of a general takeaway from the conference, but something I think as we look forward into our strategic plan or our future, something I certainly would be mindful of. Thank you.
I went to a couple interesting things. One was on kind of the environmental aspects of things, of electric cars. One thing that I'm spacing on where it was outside of Amherst. They said if you build more places for people to hook up their electrical cars, more electrical cars will come. They've seen it in their community and other communities. So if you build it, they will come. But then this one gentleman who was on the panel started talking about having electric school buses and how they outside of Amherst they did this. They took all their buses and sent them off and got them retrofitted, and all the problems that they had, and then another community bought brand new ones, but it was in Canada, kind of some of the problems a steamship has when you buy, a boat or an engine from Europe. It's hard to get it fixed, but they said technology's come around. Not that I'm advocating for us to, electric school buses, but tomorrow. But it's not a bad idea. And also NERDA. So afterwards, I asked them how hard is that to re-retrofit our current bus system with our community and how far we drive them. And so it gave me a lot of good ideas on just the emissions. And somebody from the audience said, we're trying to do this in our town because we don't want our kids kind of sitting next to the fumes, which I never really thought of. So that was interesting. And then I went to one on succession planning. And that's something that Libby and I always, have been talked about a lot this last year of, we have so much institutional knowledge with staff here who've been here for a long time. When they leave, how do you capture that? And so there was the panel from Cambridge, and they talked about they sent 150 of their department heads and leaders through professional development with a big focus on succession planning. And so trying to change that mindset from, when I came in here, nobody told me any of this, and I'm gonna leave, and no one's gonna know anything. From our, on our commissions too. Someone who's been on the board for 9 years knows so much. How do we transfer this on? And that got me thinking more about onboarding, how we onboard. You get a new DPW deputy. How do we onboard somebody to Nantucket? It's not easy to live here. How do you onboard a new select board member, right? And so so how do we increase the learning curve? So that was good conversation. And then I did a bunch of little small learning labs on that second day about the charter and stuff like that. That was beneficial. It was my first year as well.
Great. I just want to mention actually the onboarding conversation is something that's come up at the Affordable Housing Trust. And that is one of the things that will be an output from us after a strategic plan is how do you, the minute someone is on the board, how do you make sure that they know where to find what they need and can be effective and voting right away? And I do think that applies to any committee and commission and any board. So I would love to see us doing more of that.
Matt, what did you do that weekend?
I baked bread. I was baking quite a bit of bread.
Any other comments from the board?
No.
Before anybody leaves, we have county after this.
Yeah.
So don't take off. Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
If we just take 2 or 3 minutes break, that's okay. I'm a little slow these days.
Yeah.
I forgot we had the county.
So this poster from MIT. Excellent. What was the conference?